3, 2, 1. Hey guys, welcome back to Gamers Creations. Today's video I'm actually super excited about. We're going to be going over a computer build tutorial. The actual video is going to be for a very low budget light gaming computer. It was for somebody that requested that I build it for them. They wanted it for both office use and only to be able to handle World of Warcraft. They gave me a budget of $350. We hit that, and it was able to handle World of Warcraft on all ultra settings. In this video, we're going to be going over all the components used. We're going to talk about why we use them, the actual build process, how to do that, and then at the end it's going to show benchmarks of that computer compared to actually my own personal computer, which handles most games perfectly fine. Alright, let's just jump into it.
So the first step to any good computer build is to select the parts. You can do that through any number of resources. PC Parts Picker, Newegg, they're all good places. For this build, we did use PC Parts Picker. Due to the budget constraints of the build, we went with an AMD FX 4300 processor. It's not the best processor in the world, but with low-end light gaming and some office use, it should handle everything fine. The next component of this build we're going to talk about is the graphics card. We went with the Asus Radeon R7 250 with 2 GB of dedicated video RAM. The reason why we went with this is because the system was already built around AMD, and it just seemed like a good choice. As for the RAM, to save the buyer a little bit of money, we went with a stick of DDR3 1600 MHz RAM that I already had on hand. For the last specific component that we're going to be talking about, I know everybody's a little curious about what does a $300 computer look like. As far as the answer goes, not great. We went with the Apex PC 375 black steel case, only because it came included with 300 watt power supply and it saved a lot off of the cost of the computer. As for the rest of the components, I will leave links to each and every one in the description, aside from the RAM of course. And if you have any other questions about the hardware, please let me know in the comments and I'd be happy to answer. Now once you're done figuring out what parts you want to use in your computer, then comes the assembly process. For me, the first step is assembling everything outside of the case and then testing it. The reason why you want to do this is just in case anything's dead on arrival, it's better to know before you get everything put in the case and ready to go than after. And just a side note, anytime you're installing RAM, you're going to want to take a look at the owner's manual. It's going to tell you in there which slots to put it in, whether you're using 2, 1, or 4 slots of RAM. There are specific slots that will improve the performance of your computer. When it comes to installing the processor, you want to lift the pin, remove the cover, pay very close attention to where the pins are on the processor. At one corner there is a triangle that will match up with the triangle on the motherboard. Make sure you put the processor in facing the correct direction and then put the pin back down. It will take a little bit of pressure. After you install the processor, the next step is to install the processor cooler. When you're doing this, make sure you're careful not to touch or mess up the thermal compound on the bottom of the cooler. When you're clipping the cooler on, with an AMD cooler, all you have to do is clip one side and then clip the other and turn the lever to torque it down. It should stay pretty tight right after that. Once the CPU cooler is fastened to the motherboard, go ahead and plug in the 4-pin header. Once you get all of that done, it's time to test all of the hardware outside of the case. Make sure everything works. Once you've decided that everything works the way it's meant to, it's time to start putting everything inside the case. One of the first steps to doing this is to clear out all of the cables and the wires that are in the motherboard tray to make sure you have room for the motherboard. Once you've got enough room in the motherboard tray to install your motherboard, you're going to want to locate the bag of screws and other random junk that the computer case manufacturer provided. In there are normally some gold screw things. They're called motherboard standoffs. They go in the holes that the motherboard is going to screw into. You need to remember to do these, otherwise you're going to have problems down the road. The motherboard standoffs, they just simply go in the holes that are underneath the holes where the screws go into your motherboard. The motherboard standoffs are there to make sure that the back of your motherboard doesn't short against the metal backing of most cases. The next step in the process before you install your motherboard is to install your I/O panel. This is the metal plate that goes between your outside world and the inside of your computer case at the back to make sure all of your ports can go through. This is a pretty necessary piece if you plan to keep any dust out of your computer. Once you get that incredibly annoying I/O panel to be seated correctly, it's time to pop the motherboard inside of the case. It does take a little bit of effort and pushing it a little bit against the back of the case, but once you get it in the right position, go ahead and put all the screws in and then move on to the next step. Now by this point in the tutorial, you're either ready to throw this computer out the window, go to Best Buy and buy another one, or you're absolutely loving the process. And that's even if you're still watching the video. The next step is the best part. It's when you have to do all of the cable management. Everybody loves plugging things in, so here we go. Some people will tell you that they love doing the cable management in a computer. I can appreciate a well-managed computer when it comes to the cables. However, I hate doing it. But there's really not a whole lot of advice I can give you on this process. Just make sure that you plug in everything that needs to be plugged in, such as the 24-pin motherboard power, the 4 to 8-pin CPU power, graphics card, all that good stuff, and I will show you how to do the front panel. What I like to do next in the computer build is make sure all the front panel connections are in the proper place. This includes the USB 2.0 port, the power button, reset switch, and all that stuff. Again, you have to consult your user manual most of the time to figure out where most of these go. As for the front panel ports, you really do have to just look at your owner's manual to figure out which pins these plug into, because they are a little bit complicated. But here's a picture of where they go on this motherboard. The next component in line that's just going to drive you absolutely crazy is the hard drive. I like to install this next only because sometimes larger graphics cards will prevent you from sliding these into certain types of hard drive bays. It's very simple. Just slide it in, bolt it down, and then plug in the SATA power and SATA data cables. Once you get those hard drive cables plugged in, it's time for even more cable management. And feet. So the next step in the process is plugging in your fan headers. They plug into 3-pin ports that are scattered throughout your motherboard. Normally they have 2 to 3, maybe 4 on a motherboard, and you can't really plug them into anything else, so it's pretty hard to mess it up. And more cable management. So the second to last part of this video is installing the graphics card. You're going to be installing the graphics card into a PCI slot. There are a few of them on the motherboard. In order to install the graphics card, you have to slide it into the slot, apply some force, and it'll just pop in. You need to remove one of the back panels from the case. Sometimes they unscrew, sometimes you have to forcefully remove them, and then screw the graphics card into its place. Now for the final step in the process, you guessed it, more cable management. Go ahead and make sure you tidy up all the cables inside your case and behind it. Behind the motherboard tray is normally a little bit of space for you to tidy up those cables, make sure they look a little bit better than they normally do. And then there's also the operating system install, but we won't be covering that in today's video. So guys, coming away from this video, there's a lot of things that I could take away from it. The first thing would be that building in a low-budget computer is not such a terrible thing. This computer case does not look like an incredibly high-end computer, but at the end of the day, managing the wires and the cables and stuff inside of it was not absolutely terrible. At the end of the day, running the benchmarks, running World of Warcraft on ultra settings, making sure that it could do everything that it was meant to do, it did it. So whether you're a first-time computer builder just trying to get into computer games and you don't really have a whole lot of money, or you're a big-time enthusiast who already has a pretty good rig, this computer is still a pretty good option for you because it does do pretty much anything it's required to do. Light gaming is a thing, and any kind of office work or regular day-to-day activities such as Google Chrome are going to work on it. So here are the benchmarks from the computer build, and also some just quick pans over the computer after the build so you can see the computer, so you can see the cable management inside the computer. So just remember, if you did like the video, make sure you subscribe, thumbs up, comment, let me know how I did. I always appreciate the feedback, and I always accept any kind of criticism. Thank you. Bye-bye. To those of you that have stuck around to this point in the video, I just wanted to say thank you. I put a lot of time into this video, and I do appreciate you sticking around to watch it. Have a good day.